The Galactic Council chamber was a monument to the unity of 1,000 civilizations, a vast ring of floating platforms suspended in the void of space. The ancient structure hung in orbit around a dying red star, its gravity-defying architecture a testament to the combined ingenuity of the countless species that had gathered here. Today, however, unity wavered. The air, if it could be called that, was thick with tension, and the vast assembly of alien representatives murmured in countless voices, some deep and resonant, others sharp and clicking. At the center, elevated above all, was Voss, an elder of the Zeltari, his translucent jellyfish-like form pulsing with soft cyan light as he addressed the gathered council. The matter of the Terrans must be resolved. His voice, transmitted across the chamber through a universal translator, was measured yet firm. For centuries we have observed them. We have watched their expansion beyond their homeworld, their hesitant steps into the wider galaxy. They are not like us. Their ways are erratic, their history violent. A murmur spread through the chamber. The Dravari, a reptilian warlike species, clicked their claws together in agreement. The insectoid Vreks chittered amongst themselves, their antennae twitching. The Illyri, the most ancient of the telepathic species, projected an undercurrent of concern into the shared consciousness of the Council. Even the synthetic Xiphos collective, who processed emotion only in the abstract, emitted low-frequency hums of agreement. Voss continued, his bioluminescence dimming in emphasis. We have examined the records of their wars, their conflicts stretching back to the dawn of their civilization. They fear war, yet they prepare for it relentlessly. They build weapons that can shatter worlds. They maintain fleets that rival entire armadas. They speak of peace, but they act as though war is inevitable. The murmurs grew louder, dissent and agreement mixing together in a cacophony of alien voices. Then a single platform rose from the lower levels of the chamber. It carried a lone human, Ambassador Elias Voss. He stood with rigid posture, clad in the formal black and silver uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. His eyes, gray as storm clouds over an ocean, were unreadable. His presence alone sent a hush through the chamber, not because of his words, but because of something deeper, something primal. Humans carried an intensity about them, an unspoken tension that set them apart from other species. Voss regarded him with an unreadable gaze. "Humanity must explain itself," he said. "Tell us, why do you fear war so much?" Voss exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening on the edge of his podium. When he spoke, his voice was steady but heavy with something that sent a ripple through the gathered delegates. "You misunderstand us, Counselor," he said. "We do not fear war." Silence. The kind that weighed on the bones of those present, settling deep into the marrow of even the most ancient beings in the room. Voss's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with something unreadable. We guard against something far worse. The tension in the chamber thickened, a tangible force pressing down on the gathered species. Voss's glow flickered in confusion. Worse than war? Impossible. War is the greatest horror intelligent life can inflict upon itself. Voss's lips curled in something that was not quite a smile. "That's what you believe," he said, "because you've never seen the alternative." A wave of unease passed through the council. The Illyri, attuned to emotion and thought beyond the physical, projected silent apprehension. The Dravari, who had fought wars among themselves for millennia, shifted uneasily in their seats. Even the Xiphos collective, who processed logic without emotion, dimmed their interface lights in silent contemplation. Voss leaned forward slightly, his presence almost suffocating. "You called us paradoxical," he said. "You think we hoard weapons because we fear war." He shook his head. "That's not why. We prepare because we know what's out there." Vash's form darkened slightly, an indication of doubt. "Explain," he commanded. Voss's gaze swept across the assembly. "You believe in an ordered galaxy," he said. "You think life is meant to evolve, to reach for the stars, to build civilizations. But not everything that exists follows your philosophies of peace and cooperation." His voice dropped, the weight of it pressing against the gathered species. A silence so profound followed his words that even the energy-base beings of the Exien collective ceased their ambient humming. Voss's glow pulsed erratically. "You claim to have knowledge of such beings. Where is your proof?" Voss's fingers tapped the console on his podium, and the central display activated, revealing classified footage. It showed a barren planet, no name, just a designation. Exo 7. A Terran exploration fleet had arrived there a decade ago, responding to a distress call from an independent research outpost. The footage flickered as the first landing team entered the colony's remains. There were no bodies, no wreckage of battle, just absence, as if the entire population had been peeled away. Buildings still stood, machinery still hummed. A half-eaten meal remained on a table, but not a single trace of organic life remained. Then, in the final frame, something appeared at the edge of the screen. A silhouette, tall, wrong, and then the feed cut to static. Voss's light flickered in distress. Voss's voice was cold. "We lost the team, we lost the fleet, and whatever was on that planet. It wasn't war, it wasn't conquest." His fingers curled into fists. "It was consumption. And it was just a scout." The council chamber, once filled with voices of skepticism, was now overcome by something else. Dread. Voss stepped forward, his presence radiating an intensity no other species could match. "You think humanity is paranoid, that we build weapons because we fear war." His voice darkened. "No. We build weapons because we know what happens when you're not ready." He gestured toward the display, which now showed classified footage of Terran black site research projects. Weapons beyond conventional warfare, orbital deterrence, planet-cracking ordnance, bioengineered countermeasures. The Dravari warlord hissed, This is madness." Voss locked eyes with him. "No, this is survival." Voss's glow dimmed. "You truly believe this threat exists?" Voss's gaze was like iron. "We don't believe, Counselor." He tapped the console again, showing a final set of classified data. It was an intercepted signal, a transmission in no known language, no known pattern, no known emotion. Just 3 repeating words, deciphered by Terran linguists. "We are coming." Voss looked at the assembled delegates. "You asked why we fear war?" His voice was low, but it carried across the entire chamber. "We don't. We fear the day war is no longer enough." The chamber erupted into chaos. The chamber was in turmoil. Voices clashed in overlapping languages, from the guttural growls of the Dravari to the melodic resonance of the Ilari. The Vrex clicked their mandibles in rapid succession, an anxious tick that only happened when their hive minds processed danger. Even the Xiphos collective, usually silent in all but their mechanical efficiency, transmitted urgent pulses of information among their networked consciousness. Fear had taken root in the Galactic Council. Voss let it fester. He stood motionless as the aliens debated, argued, and denied the reality that had just been placed before them. His hands remained steady on the console, though his jaw was clenched so tightly that the muscles in his face twitched. He had seen this reaction before. He had seen it in the early days of humanity's first encounters with the greater galaxy, when species that had never known war encountered a race that had mastered it. The same disbelief, the same refusal to accept that danger could exist beyond their ordered view of reality. Voss finally raised a limb, and the chamber gradually fell into silence. His cyan bioluminescence pulsed erratically, betraying emotions he was otherwise too composed to express. He turned his gaze toward Voss, his voice carefully neutral. "The transmission you have shown us," Voss said, "while disturbing, is not proof of a threat. It is merely an anomaly." Voss laughed. The sound was bitter, humorless. "An anomaly," he repeated, as if testing the word in his mouth. He looked up, letting his gaze sweep the assembled representatives. "You think this is the first? You think this is the only world we've lost?" Voss hesitated. "There have been no official reports of missing human colonies beyond your own government's records. If this is such a widespread danger, why has no one else encountered it? Because you're lucky, Voss said, his voice flat. Or you're blind. The Vrex delegate leaned forward, its chitinous exoskeleton glinting under the artificial lights. Its mandibles clicked before its translator engaged. If what you say is true, human, it said, then why do you still exist? If these creatures consume all life, why does your species still stand? Voss's expression darkened. Because we stopped them, he said, but not in the way you think. Silence fell once more. Even those who had been skeptical now listened. Voss tapped another command into the console and the central display changed again. This time there was no grainy, static-filled footage, no half-captured horrors lurking at the edge of the frame. Instead, the screen displayed an orbital scan of a star system. A barren world hung at the center of the image. Not lifeless, dead. Or Voss's glow dimmed further. What is this? Voss's voice was barely more than a whisper. We called it Kepler 62F. A pause, then a slow murmur of recognition rippled through the chamber. The name was familiar. It had been one of humanity's earliest deep space colonies, a thriving settlement beyond the Sol system. Had been. Or Voss's form stiffened. Your own records state that Kepler 62F was abandoned due to atmospheric collapse. Voss let the lie sit for a moment before he shattered it. No, he said. That's what we told the galaxy. The truth is, we made sure there was no atmosphere left to collapse. A sharp hiss escaped the Dravari delegation. The Aelari recoiled as a wave of horror swept through their telepathic network. Even the Zephos collective went silent, their usual data transmissions ceasing for the first time in recorded history. Voss kept speaking, his tone quiet but unrelenting. We detected them there before we understood what they were, before we realized what they could do. We lost the colony in days. It wasn't war. It wasn't even slaughter. It was harvesting. He exhaled sharply. The things that landed on that planet didn't come in ships. They didn't send demands. They didn't establish territory. They simply arrived, and when they did, they started taking. His fingers curled into fists. People vanished, not just their bodies, their presence. No remains, no biological traces, nothing for us to even bury. It was like they had never existed. Vash, despite his horror, pressed forward. And how did you stop them? Voss's eyes were steel. We didn't. The chamber remained frozen, every species hanging on his words. We lost that world, he admitted. But we weren't about to let them spread. We sent our fleet, yes, but not to fight, not to reclaim. We turned Kepler 62F into a grave. The display shifted again, now showing the planet's final days, orbital bombardment on a scale no species in the chamber had ever witnessed. Gigaton warheads detonated across the surface, shattering mountains, turning oceans into steam. The atmosphere burned away, layer by layer, until nothing remained but charred rock and a dead sky. We didn't fight them, Voss repeated. We erased them. Voss's bioluminescence flickered violently. You destroyed an entire world? Yes. You committed genocide,